Lo Anderson is the Student Engagement Coordinator for CUNY CARES. CUNY CARES, or Comprehensive Access to Resources for Essential Services, is a new model for helping CUNY students find the campus and community-based essential services they need for healthcare, mental health, food, and housing. Lo gave a lecture at the pop-up about the hidden resources available to CUNY students, one of them being the Fair Fares program. Fair Fares is a city program that helps New Yorkers with low incomes reduce their transportation costs. By using the Fair Fares discount, New York City residents get a 50% discount on subway, eligible bus fares, and Access-A-Ride. Lo deep dives on the positives of the program, eligibility, and challenges many face when applying. If you're a CUNY student and have questions on Fair Fares or any other resources available to you, contact CUNY CARES at cares@cuny.edu. Check out CUNY CARES work. Links are in the description box below.
2017 that it launched, but 2019 is when they started making arguments for expansion, right? Like, this is not capturing all the people that y'all are saying it's captured. We need to include more people. As a navigator at CUNY CARES, you normally book an appointment with someone like me and we'll assess you for your eligibility for public benefits, right? Which means looking at your income, how much you're earning right now, and looking where verifying where you live. So, you can go to the next slide. Okay, cool. So today is just fought by a lot of CUNY talent. Okay, I am from John Jay. Like I said, my degree is in human services and community justice. So for me, I have stake in the intersection between what's being created for communities and making sure that we're engaging with them when we create those tools, right? Right now we have AI, different types of things that are being used for surveillance and not always for good, right? So the whole idea of the Pit Lab is the fact that we make technology for good. So I also want to implore you, because as an advocate, what's important for me to share with folks is that everybody in the room is qualified to critique city services, right? And the fact that you use the subway already makes you an expert of that experience, right? Just this morning, unfortunately, I shared this exchange with a man who was laying across the seat, right? So a majority of us in the car couldn't share, sitting down at that time, and then the police came on and had to ask him to sit up, right? So when I say that, I'm sharing again that intersection. Even criminal justice comes into the conversation on just getting on the train, right? And we also see they've built all these new barriers and different things to stop fare evasion. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then you all know y'all, professor and your classmates. So we're gonna address one main question, talk about who's in charge of transportation services in New York City, talk a little bit more about CUNY CARES. I'm also gonna get into an initiative that the University Student Senate is leading, calling for free Metro cards for all CUNY students. So hopefully at the end of this discussion, if you guys agree, then you'll be signing that petition that we want to advocate for free Metro cards for all CUNY students, not just some, right? Okay, go to the next one. Okay, so our main question today is, after 6 years of Fair Fares expansions from 100% of the federal poverty level to 145%, why are CUNY students still choosing between tuition, food, and transit, right? So even though this has been expanded multiple times, and the last one was a combination between Mayor Eric Adams and the City Council Speaker Adrian Adams, and they pushed it to this 145. But there's another step forward that we have to make, right? And currently, the more progressive advocacy is for 200% of the federal poverty line, so including even more people. So why is it that when Fair Fares exists, people are still choosing between tuition, food, and transit? Anybody want to share their thoughts?
I mean, I think some people just honestly don't know much about the Fair Fare program, or even if they qualify. Like for me, I have a Fair Fares Omni card, and originally I wasn't exactly sure even if I qualified. But after I heard about it from a friend who did, I just filled out the form and saw from Access HRA that I qualified, and they gave me the card. So it's probably a matter of letting more people know that this program exists, and that actually a lot of CUNY students qualify for something like this Fair Fare program.
Yeah, awareness is a huge thing, and that's something that we've figured out in CUNY CARES as well, and doing 3 years of this research. Awareness is a huge problem, right? Like, we're still talking to students who don't know their campuses have food pantries where you can take free groceries home for you and your family, right? They don't know that there are emergency grants available on campus in case you're not even eligible for Fair Fares or other programs. You would be able to get that assistance in another way. So that awareness is a huge element of it. Anybody else? Why are folks still choosing between these three things?
I think sometimes it's also like stigma, and some even though it's something that impacts a lot of people, like you said, I think it's like even connects to like the issue of homelessness in New York. Like a lot of folks who are homeless are like native New Yorkers or who like, you know, are children, and like it happens way too often. But I do still think it's a sense of shame, and so I think sometimes folks like they feel a bit like uncomfortable going to these like resources because they feel like it's super vulnerable. And so I know there are more people trying to emphasize that these are for everybody. Like it doesn't really matter like what can I say, like, everybody's entitled to like not having to choose between this, right? Everybody should be entitled for free, fair, free food, things like that. But I think sometimes like it's that lack of awareness that these things exist for like you can kind of get like these programs exist, but also kind of that stigma with needing these things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Stigma is a huge part of it, right? And sometimes when you need something, it's difficult to show up in community and say that you need it, right? It's not often that people are on the squad of like, we all need this, that's dope. None of us can afford the subway, amazing. Like, no, right? We all want to have equal access to it. And that's a part of what CUNY Cares is about, right? Because it feels a little bit different when a grown person who's in charge of a whole wellness center, for example, at your college talks to you versus one of your peers and one of your friends, right? So that's a big part of what we try to do is remove that stigma from applying. Okay, cool. Let's go. Move forward. So who's in charge of transportation in NYC? When we think about the subway, it's the MTA, right? Transportation, Metropolitan Transportation Authority, right? They run the buses, they run subway, and they run commuter rail overall. Another important person to look to though, right? And I always want students to start thinking in the context of advocacy, right? So that's why my question to people when I talk about city services or equitable services is who's in charge, right? Because that's the person that you need to address your complaints to. What often happens when we're systemically in a situation that is unfair is we field our complaints to one another. Man, homie, and friend, I'm struggling to afford this MetroCard fare, right? Or I hopped the train yesterday, and our frustration stays with us. So in order to orient towards social justice, you gotta know who you're fielding the complaint to. Or what a lot of people say is follow the money, right? So in New York City Council, they have something called committees. How many people have heard of that before? A committee. What's the purpose of a committee? Or anybody?
The committee could kind of discuss whatever issues that the community is facing and kind of advocate for additional support.
Okay. You wanna share?
Basically the same thing, but I was gonna say that they also try to come together, reach a conclusion or a solution together.
How many people knew that they were allowed to testify at city council hearings? Okay, so we have one, right? So I'm here to share that with you today, right? Regular constituents and people in the city, we are all allowed to be in that session, right? So even though folks who are in charge and have a position of power are the people who facilitate those hearings, often if you follow them, right? If you're following what's happening on city council, literally anything that you care about has a committee, right? We were talking about how fair fares is a criminal justice issue because we're talking about fare evasion, homelessness in the city. So the Committee on Criminal Justice, if you're a person who's riding the train every single day and you see crazy stuff happening, you might have stake in bringing that to a city council hearing, right? And you get a minute or two to kind of make your case, okay? So the committee that we're talking about when it comes to fair fares is Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Right now, City Council member Sean Abreu is the chair of that committee, and he happens to be a Manhattan City Council member. There's also, I want to shout out another CUNY Pit Lab project with the Civic app, right? Using the Civic app is a great way to kind of get a sense of who you need to talk to about what's happening with your city services, right? What does transportation look like for you in your neighborhood? I know in the Bronx, what really grinds my gears about transportation for me, how many people know what a two-fare zone is? What's a two-fare zone? What does that mean?
Isn't it like an area where a lot of people have to like commute from the bus to the train or like vice versa, so you're getting charged?
Correct. So I am from the Bronx, always repping the Bronx, right? But I live in a two-fare zone, meaning that in order to get to the train, it's gonna be 13 minutes to the 6 train or maybe a 20-minute bus ride to the 2 train. I'm slapped in the middle, right? And them pretty city bikes have not reached up towards my area in the Bronx yet. So when it comes to equity and people being able to get to the train station, before I even deal with all the craziness that's on the MTA, 15 minutes before I even get there. So she asked, what don't they have free transfers when you go from the bus to the train? Anybody experiencing pursuing that transfer and not getting it? Anybody experience that? I have as a person who lives in the two-fare zone, right? And what do I mean by that? Explain a little bit. So it's supposed to be, the policy says that you're supposed to get free transfers, right? Within a certain time period.
Yeah, so like for me, I also, I think, live in what we consider a two-fare zone. So like when I get off the E-train, I then have to wait for the bus. If I like, it's either wait for the bus or just walk the distance. But I feel like every time I go, anytime like I tap again, it just charges me for a second time. And that's really it. And like I'll just get off the train, so I don't really have a transfer.
Right. So that's a really challenging thing, right? Where we have an unclear policy set in place. Your belief is that all transfers should be free, especially if it's in the immediacy, right? Like if I get off the train and I get on the bus, I shouldn't have to pay the full price again. But recently, a change from one thing to another happened with the MTA. What happened recently? What's gone now and no longer being used? The MetroCard, right? And that's something I want to talk about in terms of equity today. In terms of the Fair Fares program, my theory, I have a theory that the Fair Fares program is not what it used to be with the MetroCard, right? Under Omni, there's new rules, there's new incentives. So that's why it's really important that we keep our eyes on the city and what they're doing, right? Because getting double charged, if you only got $5 left, is a huge deal. It's a huge deal. And so we should take stake in whether that's happening fairly or not, right? This last one is supposed to say DOT. This is Department of Transportation, and they're the ones who are in charge of streets, bus lanes, and bus stops, okay? That's another issue I have in terms of like utility. For some reason during rush hour in my area, they don't seem to think that we need to get anywhere. Okay, so it will be like 8:15 in the morning, and I will be waiting sometimes 13, 20 minutes for the next bus to come to me in my two-fare, right? So we have to ask in terms of equity, what message is that sending? What message is the MTA sending to people in my neighborhood about our urgency to get to work on time? There doesn't appear to be too many, right? So let's continue. Okay, so let's talk about transportation at CUNY. We were just talking about it a little earlier. So the first program that you think of when you think of free Metro cards at CUNY is definitely ASAP, right? I was an ASAP student at Hostos Community College, so shout out to CUNY ASAP, okay? Anybody here been in that program or know somebody who's in that program? Cool. Anybody not qualify for that program? They maybe tried to access ASAP and they didn't have any luck? Yeah? What happened when you tried to apply?
I think it was income thing.
It was an income thing, right? So the other program that Flogo is supposed to be here is also College Discovery and Seek students, right? Those students are in a certain income eligibility and they might get additional financial assistance to be able to allocate towards a Metro card, right? But do we have any ASAP or College Discovery students in here right now? Right. So we know that these two programs are just two small advisement programs and that a lot of CUNY students might not fall into these two categories, right? For me, to my surprise, ASAP was really relegated to the two-year school. Once I got to John Jay, there was no more MetroCard for me, right? Also, many people don't know about CUNY ASAP that your enrollment with the free Omni card is contingent upon your enrollment with college, versus Fair Fares is an annual approval, right? So if you have an experience, for example, you finished the fall semester, you're not signed up for winter. When I was in ASAP, that meant your MetroCard got cut off, right? And you had to go and get a new one. I know recently they've relaxed their policies around that and tried to extend it. I'm not positive on that because it didn't work for them. But we do meet with CUNY ASAP students all the time who are a bit confused, right? I have this free MetroCard, but now I'm not taking as many classes. If it's all contingent on just what you're doing academically, that can also be challenging as well, right? And then on the bottom here, we have Petrie grants. How many people have heard of the Carol Milton Petrie grant? One. What is it? Do you know?
I heard about it briefly, but I believe they give grants to students who like have an emergency or need of funding.
Correct. So I guess that's my
never even had a chance to even get their education or sit in class and listen. So if you can't get to where you need to go, it's kind of impossible to do something.
Yeah, I agree.
I wanted to add on, like, I think it's also important to just like kind of be involved in the campus life. Like, I feel like there's a lot of like student activities that happens outside of when you have classes or even days when you don't have class. And so I know a lot of people like they'll decide just not look to go to those like activities because it's not required, even though they're really interested in it.
Mhm.
And like I used to work for an office all about scholarships and fellowships, and one of the really messy things about when you're trying to get like any like additional funding after undergrad is that they want to see your extracurriculars, but if you can't afford to go to school on the days when you don't have classes to be part of those extracurriculars, then you can't put that on your resume. You can't like kind of go to whatever like program you want next. Like it's one of those things that people don't really talk about enough.
Correct. CUNY students are in this catch-22, right? The city believes in us in a lot of certain contexts. But then when it comes to really making things equitable, things are not sustainable to support going forward, right? Then we become too expensive. Then college becomes a luxury and this extra thing. We know as adults and people who are heading towards adulthood, you need the college degree, baby, if you want to make an equitable amount of money, especially living in New York City, right? So this is what exists at CUNY now. But the reality is there are a lot of people who are not getting caught by this umbrella, right? They might not be ASAP students, they might not be CD or SEEK, and there might not be any alternatives. One thing that I would tell you is a great support, right, and a good indicator that you might be eligible for fair fares is if you're not in either of these programs, right? Then you should be asking yourself a question about it even more. Because if the school is not going to support you through it, then the city might certainly make that choice, right? And then in an emergency situation, you can reach out to your school's wellness center or resource center and ask them about the Petrie grant because that's CUNY-wide right now.
Oh, I'm not sure if you mentioned it. Did you mention the CUNY ACE program? Because you talked about how like after 2 years, the Metro card goes away. I think ACE is for 4-year students.
ACE is for 4-year students, correct. But I was a transfer student, so I was a non-traditional student. So when I transferred from Hostos and I had ASAP at Hostos, I didn't transfer from ASAP to the ACE program. They're separate completely, right? So meaning if you start at the 4-year school, at a John Jay or at a Hunter, then you might start in ACE, right? ASAP is relegated to the community colleges, which is why it's great because equity-wise, if you start in the 2-year, then you're almost guaranteed a little bit of transportation assistance, right? I'm a non-traditional student, so I'm 33 years old. When I first came to CUNY, I went to Hunter, and then I went back into the community and I was working for 10 and a half years. It took me a long time to come back to CUNY. Okay, it took me a long time to come back. But once I did, I was pushed into the ASAP program. They didn't give me a choice. They were like, yeah, girl, free books and transportation. You don't know that you need this, right? And I learned later on that it was a really huge help to me, right? Even though I didn't feel like, at the beginning, I was just like, oh, all these workshops, this development, I feel so old, right, compared to my classmates. But equity is equity, right? And you just said transportation makes a huge difference when it comes to trying to get to school on time, right? Let's continue. Okay, so what is CUNY CARES? CUNY CARES is called the Bronx Demonstration Project. So it started FY23 in fall of 2023, and our project lasts until June of 2026. So our research is over helping students access public benefits. That includes fair fares, but also includes cash assistance, SNAP, and other comprehensive benefits, right? With the first line of defense being your college campus, meaning is there something on your college campus that could address your need first? And then if you need further support, we're gonna be the bridge to community-based services, right? That can also maybe help your family in an ongoing way. Maybe you have an issue that is not just going to be addressed by one application being submitted. And the difference is the peer-to-peer support, right? Peer-to-peer support with application process and doc submission. And when I was going through some of Sudibo's old research on fair fares, that was something that he mentioned was really challenging about fair fares, right? The application process. I don't know anybody who comes from a community who's like, we want to share our business with someone we don't know, right? I don't know that. And that's a challenging thing to share with somebody your economic status, how much you're making, how much your parents are making, right? So when that's coming from a peer, that approach is way easier, okay? We've submitted over 300 applications to Fair Fares, so it's fair to say we about that life, right? We really want to get people to the free Metro card if possible, even folks who are already receiving, because the only rules when it comes to fair fares in terms of duplicate services is that you're not receiving Metro card or transportation services from another city agency, meaning HRE is not covering your car fare for another job placement. As long as you're not in one of chancellor that CUNY Cares is something that belongs on all CUNY campuses, right? The idea of approaching someone who is from your community, who looks like you, who is a student like you, it makes a huge difference in terms of trying to get help. How many people have used another helping service on campus? Doesn't have to be transportation oriented.
I've used the counseling center.
Okay, so what did you benefit from using the counseling center? What was the point?
Having a licensed counselor to speak about my problems, like academic problems, personal problems, just someone to listen to me for about 40 minutes once a week is really helpful in college.
Yeah, we're on the same squad, girl, because when I went back to hostels, I definitely utilized counseling services, right? And that being a licensed mental health provider that's working specifically with college students, customizable service, right? Some people are gonna try therapy out for the first time in their life because they were CUNY students, right? But there's a difference that you feel when you talk to a licensed mental health counselor than when you talk to one of your peers, right? A totally different vibe. Anyone else met with any other like support services offices besides counseling in school? What about career services? Anybody meet with someone at their school to talk about their resume? Yeah, that's a helping service, right? Do you often find that career services is staffed with other students, or do you meet with an adult? You've met with an adult before. What about other folks?
I've done both.
You've done both. So what? So then you have a perfect comparison, right? How did it feel being in a session for career services with your peer versus being with an adult?
I think for my peer, I kind of liked it better because I feel like at least when it came to kind of understanding like the confusion of like applications and not knowing where to go, I think because they would also see like I'm going through the same thing as you right now, but I'm
Right.
also applying for some things. I feel like that was more motivating. But I do think in general, like meeting with adults, they have more knowledge about some of the opportunities that were out there. So I feel like it depended if I was looking for like more emotional support, then I think I'd like when it was another student. But if I was looking for like just kind of a more technical support, where like where should I be looking? What are some things I should like consider? Who are like can I reach out to X, Y, and Z person? Is that appropriate? I think sometimes meeting with an adult was a bit better.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent point, and it kind of meets that intersection of who's in charge, right? Like who's in charge of these services? Obviously, we have offices and people who get funding to like put you guys in different workshops and do different things, right? But when a peer approaches you with something, there's a different level of understanding, and CUNY Cares is training people on the technical know-how. So what would it look like if that fused together, right? The confidence and technical know-how of meeting somebody with authority, because we're qualifying our peers as that, right? And also that emotional support. For me, what I describe is not being on the hook, right? I tell students all the time when I meet with them, it don't matter to me if you're good. I appreciate it if you do, but this is for you, right? This is a session that's led by you in terms of your basic needs and what you want for yourself, right? For me, out of all the things that I could sign you up for, SNAP being the most challenging, right? Because it provides the most comprehensive assistance. Who knows what SNAP is, by the way? I don't want to assume. You want to share? Because I haven't heard your voice yet. What do you know SNAP to be?
Basically you use it like for groceries, I think like I think it caps that for certain like foods like you could get like at the supermarket or you have it available I think like at some corner stores.
Yes, so it's a free grocery support program for people, right? And that's also a part of our advocacy in CUNY Cares. We have this hypothesis that there's a lot of students that are eligible for SNAP and they're not aware. Just like you guys said, there's not a lot of awareness around fair fares. It's not an awareness about CUNY Cares and about the fact that these support services are here to help you. Also because we're all in the same habit as CUNY students of the in and out, are we not? It's very easy to get in and out of your building without interacting with people. And you also mentioned another issue of equity, which I'm glad that you brought up. When it comes to like being a student on campus that's involved, right? Do all of us have the capacity to also, after our classes, be at a club or be in student government? That's a privilege, to be frank. It's a privilege, right? I actually had a professor at John Jay who wouldn't, like, it was most trends of professors at John Jay to give you extra credit to be at those events, right? She didn't believe it was equitable to do that because she felt like it would leave out people who were working students and who didn't have the same accessibility to campus, right? Those are the kind of thoughts that I want you to think about when you're on your college campus. That's your community. So if you're seeing something that doesn't make sense to you or not equitable, then I hope that you would use CUNY as the first example, the first space where you have power and you can show up to make it a little bit different. Okay? Let's continue. See if you're gonna show up. I love us So, this is the expanded price range, meaning this is the improvement. It used to be less than this. I can give you an example of a student who is not going to get approved for fair fares, and I want one of y'all to maybe imagine another occupation you have a student holding. I met a student who worked 40 hours at McDonald's as a manager. They were over the income limit for fair fares. Okay? Spending the majority of their week working just a little bit over minimum wage and no free Metro card. Right? Can you guys think of other jobs, like typical college jobs that people would have that would probably push them over this income limit?
Maybe a barista.
Maybe a barista, correct. Most baristas make about $22 an hour, and I know because I used to work at Starbucks for 5 years. Okay? Even with tips and other things, this breaks down to about $4.98 weekly, right? So if you're making anywhere close to $500, forget about it. Also, the way that they assess your income is before they take out taxes, which is probably the most confusing part of public benefits, period. Okay? So this is the number, not the one that hits your direct deposit, not the money you touch, but the one that they take pre-tax. What they promised you with the job, I guess, right? They promised you $5,000 every 2 weeks. $5,000 is what HRA is counting, right? And I've had students come to me confused, right? A New York City school bus driver. I'll give you another example at BCC. She was making, what she told me, what she reported to me was $600 weekly, right? So $600 weekly put her a little bit under this, but when she submitted her paychecks, her pay prior to the 600 weekly was actually 800. Okay, so even when I submitted advocacy and I said, wait, look at this application again, HRA was like, nah, she's making money, she's good, right? We know that that's not the reality in terms of once folks pay their bills and do other things, okay? So I'm gonna give you guys some tips, some hacks to make the application process just a little bit easier for you in terms of that proofing. Okay, so who doesn't end up qualifying? People who work 40 hours at McDonald's. People who work retail, baristas. Pretty much if you got a standard, in my opinion, college level type job, entry level type job, you're getting pushed out. We also know that this is typically pushing out marginalized students, which CUNY CARES has identified a couple of subgroups of people who are particularly vulnerable and not enrolling in benefits right now. LGBTQ students, working students, right? If you had that entry level job, when I came back to CUNY, I was a case manager. I was making $36,000 a year, right? Me and my son. That is certainly not sufficient to cover what we need, right? But the city is telling me, oh, you can afford it. So do that. Okay? So what do we need to apply for the Fair Fares program? You need proof of your identity and you need proof of New York City residency, right? So that could be your state ID. I showed state ID because that's the majority of identification we find that students have, right? Then you can also, this is a tip for y'all CUNY students, you can provide your proof of residency with your e-bill from your CUNY First account, right? Your e-bill says your name, your address, and verifies that you're a student taking classes, okay? So if you're having trouble maybe finding that, maybe you're a student who lives at home and you don't have a Con Edison bill with your name on it, right? You don't pay your own telephone bill, your mom pays it, right? If you don't have those things available as a CUNY student, you can go right to the financial aid account, e-bill, your name, your address, that's all I need you to bring to the meeting, okay? Let's go to the next page. So, here's the hack. How many young adults in here have done their taxes? How many people have been working long enough that you've done your tax return one time?
shows like food banks and such, like for identification?
Yes. So the purpose of this program was to add more people to having a basic form of identification, right? How many people have been to the DMV before? Okay? If you've been to the DMV, you know that's a harrowing process. Another city process that requires you to do what? Prove it, right? Even though it's you, I'm sitting in the DMV scared, like, I got all these papers with my name on it, and I still don't know if it's gonna be me, right? That's what applying to public benefits feels like for people as well. Is this gonna be enough to verify that it's me? The city likes when things match, pretty much, is what I try to explain to people. So, for the NYC ID card, you'll notice these 16 numbers on top. Your Fair Fares application will prompt you at some point for your identification, and it'll ask you, do you have an NYC ID? If you say yes, you can enter these 16 numbers into the application and verify your ID and residence, boom, one shot. Okay? So if you were to submit an NYC ID instead of a regular state ID, all you would have to submit is that, right? Because there's 3 requests. It's your identity, your residency, and then proof of your income. For me, my favorite part about Fair Fares is, if you have no income, what does that mean? You're eligible. You're eligible, right? So the majority of college students don't have jobs, are looking for jobs, right? Looking for more long-term work, or underemployed, maybe working for federal work study, or only doing an internship. The less you make, the better, right? Fair Fares is supposed to be an inclusive program. So for working students, that's why working students is a part of that. People who get pushed out. But if you're just a broke college student, maybe, please, come on down. We definitely want you to sign up for Fair Fares, okay? Because you basically skip that part. There's no income or employment to report, okay? So this is a hack. 1040 plus NYC ID. Okay. So we've talked a lot about equity, right? Whether this Fair Fares program currently at the level that it is rated is sufficient. My argument today is no, it is not. We've talked about plenty of people who the Fair Fares program excludes, right? And the University Student Senate, which is our internal CUNY government, okay, people who represent your school, my school, all schools throughout the CUNY circuit, they already made this observation, okay? And the previous University Senate chair people have been on the Senate floor and the hearing floors at City Council with the MTA, with the Department of Transportation, and they made a radical argument. All CUNY students should have free Metro cards, period. Right? How many people agree? You think that's doable? Right? So if you agree to it, then I'm gonna ask you to scan this QR code and to sign the petition. The goal is to get to 10,000 signatures, and right now we're about at 7,000 maybe? Right? Arguments that the city has made about supplying free Metro cards for CUNY students, too expensive. Too expensive, not sustainable going forward. We'll lose billions. Who says that? The MTA, right? That's the feedback from the city agencies, that this is too expensive, right? But that's why we're here doing this demonstration today, to observe that the current rate of Fair Fares is not sufficient, right? And I also want you guys to kind of co-imagine with me, because you've already been sharing about Fair Fares. If we just get out of this activation right now and walk around this mall, is this mall the right place to engage the community about Fair Fares? Who says yes? It would be a good idea to walk around the Oculus and see if people were eligible. Why?
I think kind of any awareness.
Any awareness works.
is
I agree. Okay.
There's a subway station here.
There is a subway station here. Correct. Correct. Whose responsibility is it to promote the Fair Fares program anyway? Anybody know? The city. It's the city's job to promote it, right? Anybody ever see like a Fair Fares table at their train station or something, like an engagement unit? No, right? Under the Mayor Adams administration, they did put one in this train station on Fulton, in Fulton Center. He bought his engagement unit out. They don't send them to Simpson Street by me in the Bronx, where the police arrest young men disproportionately versus other places, right? They don't send them to Parkchester in the Bronx, where we have the conductors who get on the bus with you and take the old ladies off the bus when we're trying to go home. Who didn't get fair? future, when you're hearing CUNY Cares and conversations about it, that you push and advocate to have them come to your campus. Yes, Professor.
So with students, I just want to clarify for myself and maybe the room, but like
Yeah.
when they're looking at the application, are they looking at do the students have to be independent? Can they still be dependents on their families and qualify?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. So, that's another issue of equity with the city, right? If somebody's 18 years old and they live with two parents who do earn sufficiently, they are technically supposed to apply and report all of that information, right? But we do have some category of people, for example, folks who are at the age of 22 and above, they can make an argument to public assistance. Me and my family do not share meals together, right? I'm an independent college student, okay? And there are also people below the age of 22 who are in that situation. Some people who are living with roommates, some people who do live independently or might have been mishoused, run away and foster youth, okay? So I'm always looking for somebody who either just put 18 and approve, okay? Because for me, you're 18 years old, you taking care of your own transportation costs, right? It's not most college students who are dealing with their parents who are still shelling out money for that. At that point, you're already kind of buying your own food, buying your own transportation, right? But that's something I would agree. I don't know if you agree with that. We experience a lot